The new 2014 V-Strom is advertised as having an all-new clutch assembly. Visibly, it appears to have quite a few differences, but it also appears to have at least a similar clutch basket or primary gear driven to the previous generations. The last several clutch baskets that I've got in here new for modification that I've either ordered in or whatever have some differences, and I think these may be the clutch basket that are in the new version of the 1000cc V-Strom. And a couple of things I wanted to point out before I get into one deeper is a couple of the obvious changes. You can see a casting number is a lot smaller here than it is in the previous generation. This is one right here. It's quite a bit larger there. Also, we don't see any numbers other than that, but in the newer generation we see this number 2 right here. This one is a 3F18 casting, so that's probably June of 2013. They're already making 2014 models and have been, so they've already made some revisions by then. I think these may be the baskets that they have been using. So we're going to tear it apart and look into it and see what changes have been made or improvements. Also notice that these holes here are smaller than the first generation baskets. Now these, if these are changed, this would be the third generation. There was an early style of these, then a late style. The inner plate was a major revision, but we're going to look and see what has changed in this thing, if any, and see what improvements Suzuki has made. One thing I always like to check is Freeplay between the gear and the basket. That can tell you a lot of things about one. In a brand new one, ideally you'd like to see virtually none, at least that you can control by hand. In this one, we do see some play already there. So if you can watch this spring kind of wobbles, it moves back and forth. That's actually the primary or first stage spring. That should be relatively tight in these. There is already some movement here. So either the inner plate's moving or something else. There is some slack in the basket, so that has not been eliminated in the new version, if indeed this is what's going in the 2014 models. One of the things that was a problem with the older baskets was the bearing where the basket rides on the steel gear. This is not a precision casting by any measure. You can see where they actually pull the basket out of the mold. That's the mold marks on it right there. And it's not, there's a lot of chamfer on here, so the bearing surface is actually pretty narrow. And a lot of times these are off center. This one had a clearance of about 6 thousandths. That's not bad if it would stay that way. The problem is those are bad to wear, and one of the reasons was the steel gear, the surface on it is, these are much better than the older designs or the older models, but it's still pretty rough. You can hear the scribe going across it. There's little ridges, tooling marks left in that, and they are better than they used to be, but it's still not a really good bearing surface. It needs to be a ground surface or a turn surface that's, you know, really smooth, something more like that. And that's one of the things you do when you modify a basket is I make both bearing surfaces nice and smooth. The big improvement comes with the bronze bearing, of course, but we'll have to see how this wears in the newer design if it's actually tighter. In the old baskets, you can actually see the ridges in this, maybe not in the video, but there's ridges in this that are left there from the steel gear, and you can imagine when that's moving back and forth, that's going to make it, that's going to promote even more wear. So that's one thing they haven't really changed in these, it doesn't appear, so we'll have to see how those wear. Now, one big improvement they have made to these appears to be with the new die, I assume they built for these. They've closed up the tolerance in the spring pocket windows. And if you measure this thing as it is right here, we're going to get right at 941.941. Take one of the older style baskets, same spring pocket, first stage. Look the difference right there. If you go to measure, let's get it down here below where the spring was actually wearing into this one. Take another measurement. We're going from 941 to 952. 941 to 952. That's 11 thousandths tighter. If we go to one of the bigger windows. We're at 1.9. In the older design, $1.111, 21 thousandths difference in that, and that's consistent around the other openings. So they've learned something there. We'll have to see how that wears after they get 20,000 miles on them. One of the differences you can see, this plate is much tighter than the older new baskets were, but then again, it's still not tight. You put that in one of the older baskets, and you can see the difference. While not huge, once that starts slapping around, that's where the wear starts to accelerate, and once it gets even sloppier, it gets worse. So, yes, they have made a big improvement in that. Is it enough to eliminate the plate wearing into that and the springs embedding into the aluminum? Only time will tell. We're going to need to get 20,000 miles on them, see where they stand from that. But yes, this basket is improved. It's still basically the same design. It appears that they've just come up with a new casting, a new die, and tightened up those tolerances right there. The plate seems to be the same as the old version. The gear's the same, although the machining's slightly better. Top plate appears to be pretty much the same as the old designs. All the dimensions, exterior and stuff are the same. So the difference in these windows right here can be substantial in how they control the damping process. So only time will tell.